The forest of Keshar 7 stretched endlessly in every direction, its trees rising like ancient towers toward the purple sky. Daehyun pressed his hand against the cool metal of the hover transport's window and watched the landscape pass below. He had been on this planet for 3 months now, and the beauty of it still took his breath away. The trees glowed softly in the fading daylight. Blue and green lights pulsed along their trunks like slow heartbeats. Between the massive trees, smaller plants created a thick carpet of vegetation that moved in waves as wind passed through the canopy. Daehyun had studied dozens of worlds in his career as a xenobiologist, but none had felt quite as alive as this one. Behind him, researcher Talek made a series of clicking sounds that Daehyun's translator converted into words. The Velthrian was talking to his 2 offspring, Kessa and Rin, who chirped excitedly as they looked out their own window. The young Velthrians had never been off their homeworld before this expedition, and everything fascinated them. Talek stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body covered in a pale green exoskeleton that gleamed under the transport's lights. His forearms moved constantly as he spoke, and the 2 long antennae on his head swayed with each word. The cubs were smaller, barely 4 feet tall, and their shells had not yet hardened to the deep green of adulthood. They moved with the unsteady energy of all young creatures, bumping into each other and chirping questions faster than their father could answer. Dr. Myung-hee sat in the pilot's seat at the front of the transport, her hands steady on the controls. She was the team leader, a position she had earned through 15 years of diplomatic work between human and alien research teams. Her voice came through the cabin speakers, calm and professional. "We're approaching the survey site now. Everyone prepare your equipment. We'll have about 4 hours of good daylight left when we land." Daehyun checked his pack one more time. Scanner, sample containers, emergency medical kit, water purifier, and ration bars. Everything was in order. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Collect biological samples from an unexplored section of the forest, mark any interesting species for future study, and return to the base station before dark. The transport began to descend, dropping below the canopy level. The light changed from purple to a dim green as the thick leaves filtered the sun above. Myung-hee guided them between the massive tree trunks with practiced skill, looking for a clearing large enough to land. That was when everything went wrong. The transport's console erupted with warning signals. Red lights flashed across every screen. The engine made a sound like grinding metal, and the entire vehicle lurched sideways. "Electromagnetic pulse," Myung-hee shouted. "Something just fried our systems." Daehyun grabbed his seat as the transport spun. Through the window, he watched the forest rotate around them in a sickening circle. Kessa and Rin shrieked in fear. Talek wrapped all 4 of his arms around his offspring, trying to shield them with his body. Myung-hee fought with the controls, her face tight with concentration. "I can't stop it. We're going down. Brace for impact." The transport hit the ground hard. Daehyun felt his teeth slam together. His safety harness cut into his chest as momentum threw him forward and then back. The sound of tearing metal filled his ears. Something exploded at the front of the cabin, sending smoke billowing through the air. Then silence. Daehyun's head spun. His chest ached where the harness had caught him. Slowly, carefully, he released the buckle and fell forward onto his hands and knees. Around him, he heard groaning and the sound of movement. "Everyone alive?" Myung-hee's voice was rough but steady. "Here," Daehyun managed to say. His voice sounded distant in his own ears. Talek clicked something that the translator couldn't quite catch, then switched to clearer speech. "My younglings are frightened but unharmed. I have sustained damage to my lower left leg segment." The emergency exit hissed open and smoke poured out into the forest air. One by one, they climbed out of the wrecked transport. Daehyun helped the 2 cubs down, their antennae trembling with fear. Talek limped after them, favoring his injured leg. The transport had carved a deep scar through the forest floor. Trees had been knocked aside like toys. Fires burned in patches where fuel had leaked and ignited. The main engine was completely destroyed, its parts scattered across 30 feet of ground. Myung-hee pulled out her communicator and tried to call the base station. Static answered her. She tried again with the same result. "Communications are dead. The pulse must have damaged our long-range equipment." She looked around at the forest, calculating. "We're at least 20 miles from base, deep in uncharted territory. Our emergency beacon has a range of maybe 5 miles, and that's if it's working at all." Daehyun pulled out his own communicator. The screen flickered weakly but showed no signal. Mine's the same. Myung-hee made a decision. Okay, we need to get to higher ground to boost the beacon's signal. There's a ridge about 3 miles north. Daehyun, I need you to stay here with Talek and the younglings. He can't move fast with that leg and the cubs won't be able to keep pace through rough terrain. Daehyun nodded. It made sense. Talek's species had evolved on a world with low gravity and few predators. They were brilliant scientists, but their bodies were not built for harsh environments. The injured leg would slow them down dangerously and the cubs would tire quickly. Take whoever else you need, Daehyun said. We'll set up a defensive perimeter here and wait for your signal. Myung-hee gripped his shoulder. 3 hours. 4 at most. Keep them safe. She gathered the rest of the team, checked their equipment, and headed into the forest. Within minutes, the sounds of their passage had faded, leaving Daehyun alone with Talek and the 2 frightened cubs. The forest around them was beautiful, but strange. Sounds echoed from every direction. Whistles, chirps, low moans that could have been wind or something alive. The trees created deep shadows that seemed to shift and move. Daehyun's scanner showed hundreds of life signs in the area, most of them small creatures no bigger than his hand. He helped Talek sit against a fallen log and examined the damaged leg. The exoskeleton had cracked, leaking clear fluid. It wasn't life-threatening, but it would be painful to walk on. Kessa and Rin huddled close to their father, their antennae pressed flat against their heads in distress. Daehyun tried to smile reassuringly at them. It's going to be okay, he said. Your father is tough. We'll be back at base before you know it, and this will just be a story to tell your friends. Rin chirped something too quiet for the translator to catch. Talek's antennae moved in what Daehyun had learned was the Velthrian equivalent of a sad smile. As the light began to fade, Daehyun built a small fire using pieces of the wrecked transport. The flames pushed back some of the shadows. He rationed out food and water, making sure the cubs ate even though they seemed too scared to be hungry. That was when he first noticed the smell. It was sharp and bitter, like burning metal mixed with something organic. His scanner began picking up larger biosignatures moving through the forest around them. 6 distinct contacts, each one the size of a large earth bear circling their position in a wide arc. Daehyun's hand went to the emergency flare on his belt. His heart began to beat faster. He stood up slowly, trying not to alarm Talek and the cubs. The sounds of the forest had changed. The small chirps and whistles had stopped. In their place was silence, broken only by the occasional crack of a branch or the rustle of something large moving through the undergrowth. 7 contacts now. All of them moving closer. Daehyun swallowed hard and tried to keep his voice calm. Talek, get the cubs behind you. Stay low and stay quiet. The Velthrian researcher looked up at him, antennae quivering. What is it? Daehyun watched the shadows between the trees, his eyes scanning for movement. We have company. The first creature stepped into the firelight like a nightmare made real. It stood on 6 legs, each one thick with muscle and ending in curved claws that dug deep into the soil. Its body was the size of an earth grizzly bear, covered in dark scales that reflected the firelight in shades of deep red and black. The head was massive, protected by thick plates of bone that formed a crest above small, intelligent eyes. When it opened its mouth, Daehyun saw rows of serrated teeth designed for tearing meat. The creature's breath came out in visible puffs of vapor. It watched them with the patience of something that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Behind Daehyun, Kessa made a high-pitched sound of pure terror. Rin pressed closer to his father, shaking so hard that his whole body vibrated. Talek's antennae went rigid with fear. Daehyun, Talek whispered, his voice barely working. What is that thing? Daehyun's scanner had identified the species from the research station's database. The locals called them Ravenclaws. They were the apex predators of Kashar 7's forest regions. Pack hunters, highly intelligent, extremely territorial, and there were 7 of them. Another Ravenclaw emerged from the shadows to the left, then another to the right. They moved with terrible coordination, cutting off every possible escape route. Their movements were almost casual, the behavior of predators who knew their prey was already caught. Daehyun's mind raced through his options. They had no weapons beyond a small utility knife. The emergency flare would make noise and light but wouldn't stop a creature that size. Running was impossible with Talek's injured leg and the 2 small cubs. Even if Daehyun ran alone, these things looked fast enough to catch him before he made it 20 feet. His scanner showed the full pack now. 7 distinct signatures, all of them large adults. They had completely surrounded the camp, forming a circle about 50 feet across. They were taking their time, studying their prey, looking for weakness. Talik pulled his younglings closer. His forearms wrapped around them protectively, but Daehyun could see the hopelessness in his posture. On the Velthrian homeworld, predators were rare and small. The species had evolved to rely on speed and camouflage, fleeing into burrows when danger appeared. There were no burrows here, no escape. "We are going to die," Talik said quietly. It wasn't panic. It was simple calculation, the logical conclusion of their situation. Something in Daehyun's chest rejected that conclusion with absolute certainty. He looked at the 2 small cubs pressed against their father. They were children, babies. They chirped in fear and confusion, not understanding why the world had suddenly become so dangerous. Rin's antenna had gotten tangled with his sister's, and they couldn't even separate themselves because they were shaking too hard. Daehyun thought of his own childhood, of the times he had been afraid and how his mother had stood between him and danger. He thought of every nature documentary he had ever watched, every story of parents defending their young against impossible odds. He thought of the long chain of ancestors stretching back through human history. Every single one of them survivors who had faced down predators and lived to pass on their genes. Something ancient woke up in his blood. The pack leader took a step forward. It was larger than the others, with deeper scars across its armored head. Testing, measuring, waiting for them to run. Daehyun picked up a thick branch from the pile of wood near the fire. It was heavy, solid, about 4 feet long. Not much of a weapon against something that size, but better than nothing. He activated the emergency flare on his suit. Bright red light flooded the clearing, making him appear larger. The sudden change made the Ravenclaws pause. Then Daehyun did something that had never been recorded in all of galactic history. He stepped forward, planted himself between the predators and the Velthrian family, and roared. It wasn't words. It wasn't communication. It was pure challenge, the sound of a creature refusing to be prey. His voice tore from his throat, harsh and aggressive, filled with every ounce of defiance his primate ancestors had used to drive leopards from their kills on the African savanna. The Ravenclaws froze. Behind him, Talik made a sound of complete shock. In all his years of study, in all the data about predator-prey relationships across 100 worlds, he had never seen prey behavior like this. When predators came, you ran or you died. You didn't challenge. You didn't threaten. You certainly didn't step toward danger while making yourself as loud and visible as possible. The pack leader tilted its massive head, confused. Its small eyes studied the strange creature that had appeared on its hunting ground. Too small to be a real threat. Too loud to be properly afraid. Too aggressive to match any prey behavior in its genetic memory. Daehyun's heart hammered in his chest. Adrenaline flooded his system, making every color brighter, every sound sharper. His muscles tensed, ready to move. His breathing came fast but controlled. Millions of years of evolution were speaking through his body, preparing him for combat. Another Ravenclaw tried to approach from the left side, looking to flank around Daehyun's position. Daehyun spun toward it immediately, raising his branch and charging forward 3 steps while screaming at the top of his lungs. The Ravenclaw actually backed up. It was a small victory, barely anything at all, but Daehyun's hindbrain recognized it and pushed harder. He banged the branch against a tree trunk, creating a sharp crack that echoed through the forest. He stomped his feet. He made himself as large and threatening as possible, every gesture screaming that he was dangerous, unpredictable, not worth the effort to kill. The pack circled but didn't attack. They were reassessing. This wasn't normal prey behavior. Normal prey ran in panic, making themselves easy targets. Normal prey tried to hide. This creature was doing the opposite of everything their instincts expected. Talik watched in stunned silence. His translator was working overtime, trying to find words for what he was witnessing. His species had no frame of reference for this kind of behavior. When faced with predators, the Velthrian response was simple. Calculate survival odds, accept fate if odds were poor, hope for mercy if odds were non-existent. But humans didn't accept fate. Humans made fate pull up a chair and arm wrestle for the outcome. Kessa chirped a question that came through the translator as, "What is the human doing?" Talik couldn't answer. He didn't know. This was beyond his understanding of how intelligent species behaved. The largest Ravenclaw moved closer again, more deliberately this time. It lowered its head, showing the thick bone plates that protected its skull, a threat display, an assertion of dominance. Daehyun's response was immediate and violent. He grabbed a burning branch from the fire and threw it directly at the creature's face. The Ravenclaw jerked back as embers scattered across its snout. Not injured, but startled and annoyed. Then Daehyun charged. It was complete insanity by any rational measure. He was 170 pounds of soft flesh against a 1,000-pound killing machine covered in natural armor. But rationality had left the building. In its place was something older and meaner, the part of humanity that had refused to go extinct even when saber-toothed cats ruled the night. He swung the branch with all his strength. It connected with the Ravenclaw's shoulder plate, breaking on impact. The creature barely felt it, but the gesture was clear. Attacking me will not be easy. I will hurt you. Maybe not enough to kill you, but enough that you'll remember. The Ravenclaw snarled, a deep rumbling sound that Daehyun felt in his bones, but it stepped back. The pack leader raised its head and made a series of barking sounds. Communication. The other pack members responded with their own calls. They were discussing strategy, trying to understand this strange situation. Daehyun used the moment to grab another branch and return to his position in front of Talek and the cubs. Sweat poured down his face. His hands shook from adrenaline. Every muscle in his body ached with tension, but he stayed on his feet. He kept his eyes on the predators, and when they shifted position, he shifted with them, always keeping himself between them and the vulnerable family behind him. Talek's voice was barely a whisper. Why don't you run? You could escape. You're small and fast. They want me and my younglings. You could save yourself. Daehyun didn't turn around. His eyes tracked every movement in the shadows. That's not how humans work. I don't understand. I know, Daehyun said. Just keep the cubs calm. This is going to be a long night. The Ravenclaws settled into a patient circle around the camp, watching and waiting. They had time. Eventually their prey would tire, would make a mistake, would show weakness. They had never hunted humans before. They didn't know that humans were persistence predators, evolved to outlast prey over days of continuous hunting. They didn't know that human endurance was legendary among the species of Earth. They didn't know that when a human decided to protect something, they could stand for hours without wavering. The stars began to emerge in the purple sky above. The night was just beginning. The night deepened around them, and with it came cold that seeped into bones and made breath visible in the firelight. Daehyun fed more wood into the flames, never taking his eyes off the shadows where the Ravenclaws waited. They were still there. All 7 of them. Patient as death itself. His body ached in ways he had never experienced. Every muscle was locked tight with tension. His jaw hurt from clenching his teeth. His throat felt raw from all the shouting he had done. But he couldn't rest. The moment he showed weakness, the moment he let his guard drop, the pack would strike. Behind him, the cubs had finally stopped crying. Now they just huddled against Talek in exhausted silence, their antennae drooping. Talek himself sat very still, cradling his injured leg, watching Daehyun with an expression that the human couldn't quite read. You're shaking, Talek said quietly. Daehyun looked down at his hands. The Velthrian was right. His fingers trembled constantly now, small movements he couldn't control. Adrenaline crash, probably. His body had been flooded with stress hormones for hours, and the cost was starting to show. I'm fine, Daehyun said. You're not. You need rest. Your body is failing. My body is holding up just fine. It was a lie, but saying it out loud made it feel more true. One of the Ravenclaws moved closer, testing the perimeter again. Daehyun immediately turned toward it, raising his branch and taking 2 aggressive steps forward. The creature retreated, but slower this time. It was learning that the humans' charges were mostly noise, that the actual danger was minimal. They're getting braver, Daehyun thought. They're figuring me out. He needed to change tactics, keep them uncertain. He grabbed a piece of metal from the wrecked transport and banged it against a rock, creating a sound like a gunshot. The Ravenclaws flinched at the unexpected noise. Good. Unpredictability was his only real weapon. I still don't understand, Talek said. His voice carried genuine confusion, not judgment. On my world, when predators come, we calculate survival probability. If the probability is 0, we accept death with calm. It's logical. Fighting impossible battles wastes energy and causes suffering. Why do humans do the opposite? Daehyun kept his eyes on the darkness while he answered. Because we're stubborn, I guess. Humans don't like being told what's impossible. But you must see that this is hopeless. Even if you survive until dawn, you're exhausted. You've been injured. Talik gestured toward Daehyun's arm, where blood had soaked through his sleeve from a cut he didn't remember getting. Eventually you will fall and then we all die anyway. The logical choice would be to run now, while you still have strength. Save yourself and leave you and the cubs? Daehyun shook his head. No, why not? We are not your kin. We are not even your species. My offspring mean nothing to your genetic line. By any biological logic, saving yourself serves your own survival better than dying with us. It was a fair question, coming from someone whose species saw everything through the lens of evolutionary calculation. Daehyun tried to find words that would make sense to a Velthrian mind. Humans are pack animals, he said finally. Way back in our history, we lived in tribes, small groups that took care of each other. If a child was in danger, everyone protected them, not just the parents, because that's how the tribe survived. If we only cared about our own children, only our own genetic line, we would have gone extinct thousands of years ago. But my younglings are not part of your tribe, aren't they? Daehyun glanced back at the two small forms pressed against their father. They're scared kids who need protection. That's enough. Talik was silent for a long moment. His antennae moved in patterns that Daehyun had learned meant deep thought. This trait, he said slowly, this instinct to protect non-kin, it must be a liability. It must cause humans to take terrible risks. Yeah, Daehyun admitted, it does. Humans die all the time protecting people they barely know. We run into burning buildings to save strangers. We jump into dangerous water to pull out drowning swimmers. We throw ourselves in front of vehicles to push others to safety. It's stupid by any logical measure. Then why does your species continue to do it? Daehyun smiled despite everything. Because it's also what makes us human. Take away that instinct and we'd just be smart animals looking out for ourselves. But keeping it means we're something more, something better. Talik's antennae quivered. Your species is very strange. You're not the first alien to tell me that. A Ravenclaw on the right side of the perimeter moved forward, emboldened by the long conversation. Daehyun spun toward it, screaming and throwing a rock. The stone bounced off the creature's armored head, doing no damage but making it hesitate. 3 more hours until dawn, Daehyun estimated. Maybe 4. Could he last that long? His legs felt like they were made of concrete. His vision kept wanting to blur at the edges. He had drunk the last of his water an hour ago and his mouth felt like sand. But Kessa and Rin were still alive behind him. Still breathing. Still safe. That was all that mattered. The pack leader had been watching carefully, learning. Now it tried a new strategy. Instead of approaching directly, it started moving in a circle around the camp, forcing Daehyun to rotate constantly to keep it in sight. The other Ravenclaws began doing the same, all moving in synchronized circles. Daehyun's heart sank. They were trying to make him dizzy, trying to disorient him, and it was working. He spun left, then right, trying to keep track of all 7 creatures at once. His head began to swim. One of the smaller Ravenclaws charged from behind while Daehyun was focused on the pack leader. Talik shouted a warning. Daehyun spun just in time to see the creature bearing down on him, jaws open wide. He had no time to think, only react. He dove to the side, rolling in the dirt, feeling claws pass inches from his back. He came up swinging his branch, catching the Ravenclaw across its snout. The creature yelped and backed off, but the damage was done. Now they knew that if they coordinated their attacks, they could get past his defenses. Daehyun's back burned where the claws had come close. When he touched it, his hand came away wet with blood. Not deep cuts, but enough to hurt. You're bleeding badly, Talik said, his voice tight with worry. I'm fine. You keep saying that. It keeps being untrue. Daehyun laughed, a harsh sound that hurt his raw throat. Fair point. The Ravenclaws were regrouping, communicating with their barking calls. They had learned something important. The human could be flanked. He couldn't watch all directions at once. If they attacked together from multiple angles, they would succeed. Daehyun saw it in their posture, the way they positioned themselves. This was it, the final push. They were done playing. He planted his feet and raised his branch. His hands shook so badly now that he could barely grip the wood. His vision tunneled, focusing down to just the immediate threats. His body wanted to collapse, wanted to give in, wanted to rest, but behind him Kessa made a small chirping sound in her sleep, the sound of a child who believed someone would keep her safe. Daehyun straightened his back and bared his teeth at the darkness. "Come on then," he said, his voice barely more than a croak. "Let's finish this." The pack leader roared and 3 Ravenclaws charged at once. Daehyun met them with everything he had left. He swung the branch in a wide arc, forcing one to dodge. He grabbed a burning log from the fire and threw it at another's face. The third got close enough that he could smell its breath, hot and reeking of old meat. He pulled the utility knife from his belt and slashed blindly. The blade was small, barely 4 inches long, but he caught the Ravenclaw across its nose. The creature shrieked and pulled back, blood dripping from the wound. The other 2 attacked from the sides while he was distracted. Claws raked across his leg. Teeth snapped near his shoulder. He fell, hitting the ground hard, rolling to avoid getting pinned. Pain exploded through his body. Everything hurt. Everything screamed at him to stay down, to give up, to let the darkness take him. He thought of his mother again. Remembered a story she had told him about his grandfather, who had been a soldier. How he had been injured in combat but kept fighting because his squad needed him. How he had said that you don't stop fighting until your body physically won't move anymore. Daehyun's body still moved. He pushed himself up, staggered to his feet, grabbed another branch from the woodpile, planted himself between the predators and the cubs one more time. The Ravenclaws had stopped, staring at this impossible creature that refused to die. They had wounded him. They had torn his flesh. They had every advantage, and still he stood. Talek watched in absolute awe. He had studied hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. He had seen countless examples of survival instincts, of fight-or-flight responses, of evolutionary adaptations. But he had never seen anything like this. This wasn't instinct. This was choice. Pure, stubborn, illogical choice. The human should be dead. By every measure of biological logic, he should have fallen minutes ago. But he stood there, bleeding and shaking and clearly at the end of his endurance, and he would not move from that spot. "Daehyun," Talek whispered. "I understand now. This is what makes your species special. Not your technology, not your intelligence. This." Daehyun didn't answer. He didn't have breath for words anymore. He just stood there, branch in hand, and waited for the next attack. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. The first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy like golden spears, painting the forest in shades of amber and green. Daehyun had never been so grateful to see light in his entire life. The Ravenclaws stirred uneasily. They were nocturnal hunters built for darkness and ambush. Daylight meant their advantage was fading. The pack leader made a series of frustrated barks, but the others were already backing away, melting into the shadows between the trees. Daehyun swayed on his feet, barely aware that he was still standing. His branch had fallen from numb fingers at some point. Blood had dried in dark streaks down his arms and legs. His right eye had swollen almost shut from a blow he didn't remember taking. The pack leader was the last to leave. It stared at Daehyun with what might have been respect or perhaps just confusion. Then it turned and disappeared into the forest. Silence fell over the clearing. Daehyun stood for another moment, his body not quite believing the danger had passed. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Talek was at his side immediately, his forearms moving to check for injuries.
"Daehyun."
"Stay with us."
"You must stay conscious." Daehyun tried to respond, but his mouth wouldn't work properly. Everything felt distant and fuzzy. He was so tired. Sleep seemed like the best idea in the universe. A new sound cut through the morning air. The whine of engines. Daehyun forced his good eye open and saw hover transports descending through the canopy. Myung-hee's voice crackled over the communicator. "We have your position. Medical team is inbound." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. People in medical gear swarmed around him. Someone pressed something cold against his neck and the pain receded to a distant throb. Someone else was wrapping his wounds in smart bandages that sealed and treated injuries automatically. Myung-hee knelt beside him, her face pale. "What happened?" "We picked up massive biosignatures on our way back." "Predators?" Talek answered before Daehyun could. 7 Ravenclaws. They surrounded us completely. We should all be dead. His antennae trembled. Your human stood between them and my younglings for the entire night. He fought them alone. The medics exchanged glances. One of them, a human woman named Hannah, shook her head in disbelief. Ravenclaws? For a whole night? That's not possible. No one survives that? He did, Talek said simply. I watched him do it. They loaded Daehyun onto a stretcher and carried him to the transport. Kessa and Rin followed close behind, their antennae reaching out to touch his hand as they walked. They chirped softly, words too quick for translation, but the meaning was clear. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The flight back to the research station took 20 minutes. Daehyun drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of voices around him but unable to focus on the words. He caught fragments of conversation. Blood loss is severe but manageable. No broken bones somehow. Vital signs are stabilizing. How did he stay on his feet this long? At the station's medical bay, they transferred him to a proper bed with advanced healing equipment. Hana ran scanners over every inch of his body while Myung-hee stood nearby, her arms crossed. 37 separate injuries, Hana reported. Mostly cuts and bruising. 3 ribs are cracked. Severe muscle strain in both legs. Exhaustion to the point of system shutdown. And he's severely dehydrated. She looked up from her scanner. He should be in a coma. His body should have shut down hours ago. But he's stable? Myung-hee asked. Yes, amazingly, yes. He'll need rest and treatment, but he'll make a full recovery. Outside the medical bay, Talek waited with his younglings. Station personnel kept trying to move them along, but the Veltrian refused to leave. He sat on the floor, his injured legs stretched out with Kessa and Rin curled against him. When Myung-hee came out, Talek stood immediately. How is he? He'll live. Thanks to his stubbornness, probably. Myung-hee studied the Velthrian researcher. I need your full report of what happened. The incident will need to be documented. Over the next hour, Talek gave his account. Myung-hee recorded every word, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. When Talek finished, she sat in silence for a long moment. Do you understand what this means? She said finally. You're a respected xenobiologist. Your testimony carries weight in the academic community. If you report that a human stood against 7 apex predators for an entire night to protect an alien family, it will change how other species see us. Talek's antennae moved in a pattern that meant absolute certainty. Then they should see you differently. Because that is exactly what happened. I have biological recordings from my memory organs, visual data, sound, even chemical analysis of the fear pheromones in the air. The evidence is undeniable. Word of the incident spread through the research station within hours. Scientists from a dozen different species came to hear Talek's story. Some were skeptical. Some were fascinated. All of them wanted to see the biological recordings. Talek played them in the station's main conference room. The footage showed everything from his perspective. The crash, the nightfall, the Ravenclaws circling in the darkness. Then Daehyun stepping forward. Daehyun charging at creatures 3 times his size. Daehyun standing his ground while bleeding from multiple wounds. Daehyun refusing to fall even when his body clearly wanted to shut down. The room fell silent when the recording ended. A Crowleyan researcher, a species known for their logical minds, spoke first. This behavior makes no sense from a survival perspective. He should have fled. That's what I told him, Talek said. He told me that leaving us was not how humans work. A Thenic observer, whose species resembled Earth's armadillos, chittered thoughtfully. We have worked with humans for decades. We knew they were durable. We knew they were determined. But this level of protective instinct toward non-kin aliens, this is unprecedented. Perhaps, said an elderly Velthrian professor named Surin, we have misunderstood what makes humans successful. We assumed it was their tool use and adaptability. But maybe the real advantage is this. She gestured at the frozen image of Daehyun standing bloodied but defiant, the willingness to defend others at personal cost. The discussion continued for hours with researchers analyzing every aspect of human behavior and evolution. Messages were sent to universities across multiple star systems. The footage was requested by military academies and diplomatic schools. Within days, Daehyun's stand against the Ravenclaws had become the most studied incident of human-alien interaction in recent history. Daehyun himself missed all of this. He slept for 16 hours straight, his body finally getting the rest it desperately needed. When he woke, the first thing he saw was Hana checking his vital signs. "Welcome back," she said with a smile. "You've been asleep so long we were starting to worry." Daehyun's throat felt like sandpaper. Talek, the Cubs? All fine. They've been waiting outside your room. Hana helped him sit up carefully. You've become quite famous, by the way. Everyone on the station wants to talk to you. Famous for what? Hana laughed. For being incredibly brave and incredibly stupid at the same time. Only a human could manage both. She let Talek and his younglings in. The Cubs rushed to Daehyun's bedside, chirping excitedly and touching his arms with their antennae. Talek followed more slowly, still favoring his healing leg. You're awake, Talek said. His antennae moved in patterns that Daehyun had learned meant relief and joy. We were concerned. I'm fine. Really, I'm okay. Daehyun looked at the two Cubs who were now trying to climb onto his bed. How are you two doing? Kessa chirped something that the translator rendered as, You saved us. You fought the monsters. I didn't really fight them. I just made enough noise that they decided we weren't worth the trouble. Talek made a sound that might have been Velthrian laughter. That is a very human way to describe what happened. You stood against 7 apex predators with nothing but a stick and refused to die. That's not making noise. That's courage. Daehyun felt his face heat up with embarrassment. I just did what anyone would do. No, Talek said firmly. You did what humans do, and now the galaxy knows it. He reached out with one of his 4 hands. My younglings and I owe you a life debt. In Velthrian culture, this is the most sacred bond. We are now family. By choice, if not by blood. Daehyun took the offered hand carefully, mindful of Talek's delicate exoskeleton. I'd be honored. Myung-hee appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but Daehyun, I need to talk to you about what comes next. The Velthrian government has sent an official communication. They want you to consider a position as a liaison officer between human and Velthrian research teams. Daehyun blinked. They want me to be a diplomat? I'm a biologist. I study plants. You're also the human who proved that our species will protect theirs even at great personal risk. That means something in the diplomatic world. Myung-hee smiled. You don't have to decide now. Rest first. But think about it. As she left, Daehyun lay back against his pillows, exhausted despite having just woken up. Kessa and Rin had curled up at the foot of his bed, their antennae drooping in sleep. Talek settled into a chair nearby, clearly planning to stay. You should rest too, Daehyun said. I will, but I will rest here where I can watch over you. Talek's antennae moved gently. It's what family does. 3 months had passed since the incident on Kishar 7th, and the galaxy was still talking about it. Daehyun stood at the window of his new quarters on the research station, watching ships come and go from the landing platforms. His reflection in the glass showed a man who looked older than his 35 years. New scars traced lines across his arms, reminders of that long night in the forest. Behind him, his communicator chimed with another interview request. The 23rd one this week. News organizations from across known space wanted to hear his story firsthand. Universities wanted him to speak at their xenobiology departments. Military academies wanted him to teach courses on survival and protection. He ignored the request and took a sip of his morning coffee. Some things about being human were non-negotiable, and coffee was one of them. The door chimed. Come in, he called. Myung-hee entered, carrying a datapad and wearing the expression she got when she had news he wouldn't like. Morning. I have updates from the diplomatic corps. Good morning to you too. Daehyun gestured to the chair across from his desk. What fresh chaos am I dealing with today? The Thenic Collective has formally requested human security consultants for their colony worlds. The Crolians want to study human protective instincts for their behavioral research programs, and the Velthrian Council has invited you to their home world to receive an official commendation. Myung-hee set down the datapad. Also, there are 6 new applications from human mercenary companies who want to use your story in their recruitment materials. Daehyun groaned. Tell the mercenaries no. Again, I'm not a poster child for violence. I've told them. They keep asking. Myung-hee studied him carefully. How are you handling all this attention? By hiding in my quarters and pretending I'm still a simple biologist who studies trees. You can't hide forever. What you did changed things, Daehyun. Other species are looking at humans differently now. He knew she was right. The reports had been coming in steadily for weeks. Human security contractors were seeing unprecedented demand. Human researchers were being specifically requested for dangerous field work. Human diplomats were finding doors opening that had been closed before. All because one man had refused to let children die. I didn't do it to change galactic politics, Daehyun said quietly. I did it because two scared kids needed someone to protect them. I know. That's exactly why it matters. Myung-hee leaned forward. Most species think through survival in terms of calculation. Risk versus reward, cost versus benefit. But humans add another factor, moral obligation. That's not common in the galaxy. So what, we're special because we're reckless with our own lives? No, you're special because you care about others even when it's not logical to care. That's rare, Daehyun. Rare and valuable. Before Daehyun could respond, his communicator chimed again. This time it was Talek's identifier. He accepted the call immediately. Talek's face appeared on the screen, his antennae moving in patterns of excitement. Daehyun. Excellent news. The expedition has been approved. We leave in 2 weeks. After recovering, Daehyun had accepted the liaison position. His first major assignment was to lead a joint human-Velthrian research team back to Kishar 7th. This time they would establish a permanent research station with proper defenses and emergency protocols. That's great, Daehyun said. How are Kessa and Rin? Driving me to distraction with questions about humans and Earth and whether they can visit your homeworld. Talek's antennae moved in what Daehyun now recognized as Velthrian amusement. Kessa has decided she wants to study human behavior as her academic specialty. Rin wants to learn human languages. They're good kids. They are alive because of you. Of course they are good kids. Talek's tone turned more serious. I have been reading the reports from other species. Your actions have caused significant changes in how humans are perceived. So everyone keeps telling me. Do you regret it? What you did? Daehyun thought about that night. The fear, the pain, the absolute certainty that he might die in the dark while his team leader's rescue mission failed. Then he thought about Kessa and Rin, alive and excited about their futures. No, he said, I don't regret it at all. After the call ended, Daehyun spent the rest of the morning reviewing preparations for the expedition. The new team would include 12 humans and 8 Velthrians, the largest joint operation between their species to date. They would have proper equipment this time, including weapons that could deter predators without killing them, emergency shelters that could withstand attack, and enough supplies to last 6 months. That afternoon he received a visitor he hadn't expected. The station's security team escorted a young Thenic to his quarters. The alien looked nervous, her armored plates clicking together in the Thenic expression of anxiety. Dr. Daehyun? Her translator rendered her voice as high-pitched and uncertain. I am Scholar Preen. May I speak with you? Of course. Please sit. Daehyun gestured to a chair. How can I help you? Preen settled into the chair with visible relief. I am a xenopsychology student. I have been studying the incident with the Ravenclaws. I wanted to ask you something that has been troubling me. Go ahead. When the predators came, you knew you might die. You calculated the odds and understood they were poor. Yet you chose to fight anyway. Preen's plates shifted nervously. Why? What makes a human choose certain death over logical survival? Daehyun considered how to answer. He had been asked variations of this question dozens of times, but each time it came from a different perspective, from a species with its own unique evolution and values. It wasn't certain death, he said finally. It was probable death. And probability can change based on actions. If I had run, it would have been certain death for Talek and his cubs. By standing and fighting even with bad odds, I changed the probability for all of us. But you were still most likely to die? Yes. And that was acceptable to you? No, it terrified me. I didn't want to die. Daehyun met her eyes, but I wanted those kids to die even less, so I did what I could to make sure they lived. Preen's plates shifted in a pattern that might have meant confusion or wonder. My species has no context for this behavior. We evolved on a world where survival meant hiding, burrowing, protecting ourselves. Sacrificing for non-kin makes no evolutionary sense to us. But humans didn't evolve alone, Daehyun explained. We evolved in groups, tribes, communities. The humans who worked together, who protected each other's children, who stood together against threats. They survived better than humans who only cared about themselves. Over thousands of generations, that became part of who we are. So it is genetic? Partly, but it's also choice. Every human has the ability to run to save themselves. But we also have the ability to stay and fight for others. Both instincts are there. We choose which one to follow. Preen sat quietly for a moment, processing this. Thank you for explaining. It helps my research. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it matters, I think your species is very brave. Frightening sometimes, but brave. Daehyun smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Daehyun worked closely with the team, making sure everyone understood the risks of Kshar-7 and the protocols for dealing with its dangerous wildlife. He emphasized over and over that the goal was research and preservation, not conquest. The night before departure, Myung-hee hosted a small gathering in the station's observation deck. The team members mingled, humans and Velthrians sharing food and stories, building the bonds that would be crucial in the months ahead. Talik approached Daehyun with Kessa and Rin in tow. The cubs had grown in the past 3 months, their shells darkening toward adult coloration. They still chirped excitedly when they saw him, though, and Kessa immediately launched into a story about something she had learned in her studies. Did you know, she said, her translator working overtime to keep up with her enthusiasm, that humans have a specific brain structure that activates when they see offspring in distress? Even offspring from other species. It is called the parental care system, and it makes you want to protect things that are small and vulnerable. I didn't know that, Daehyun admitted. It is fascinating. Most species only have this response for their own young, but humans extended it to include many different creatures. On Earth, you even protect and care for animals from completely different evolutionary lines. You keep them in your homes as family members. Rin chimed in. We want to visit Earth someday and see these pet animals. Father says we must wait until we are older. When you're older, Daehyun promised, I'll take you myself. You can meet my neighbor's dog. His name is Cloud, and he's very good at accepting treats from visitors. The cubs chirped their excitement, and Talik's antennae moved in parental amusement. You have created 2 xenobiology students who are obsessed with human culture. I hope you know what you've done. I created 2 kids who are excited about learning. That's the best outcome I could hope for. As the gathering wound down, Daehyun found himself standing at the observation window, looking out at the stars. Myung-hee joined him, 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She offered him one. Nervous about going back? She asked a little. But it's time. Daehyun took a sip of the wine. I can't spend the rest of my life being known for one night of terror. I need to do the work I